Could Viserys Targaryen have been redeemed? Welcome back to GVN's Character Analysis, where we look into characters from TV shows, movies, and games. I'm Tia Fabi, and today I want to talk about a specific Targaryen. No, this is not Viserys Targaryen from House of the Dragon, who was played wonderfully by Paddy Constantine. No, today I am talking about Viserys Targaryen III, Daenerys' brother. Viserys was played by Harry Lloyd in season one of Game of Thrones. We don't get a lot of Viserys, but we do get, frankly, is an asshole and a jerk. A jerk who people, a jerk who, when he was killed, people were not upset or surprised in the manner that he was killed. While he doesn't get a lot of time in the books either, we still do get some background information on him where we didn't in the show. Information like Viserys having been hidden away from the public for most of his childhood due to his father's madness. If you remember, Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen's father was the Mad King. Now, the fact that Viserys had to take care of his younger sister Daenerys and sell his mother's crown to make ends meet after the fall of the Targaryen dynasty could certainly have an effect on a young person such as himself. While none of this excuses his behavior, it does paint him in a way that we didn't get from the show. If we know anything from the shows and the books, we know Targaryens think of themselves as gods. I personally have been reading Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin, and it's certainly a eye-opener when it comes to the Targaryens. Fire and Blood is what House of the Dragon is based off of, and it is only the first part of the Targaryen lineage slash history. I do definitely suggest reading it. It reads more like a history book than, say, the Game of Thrones books themselves, but they are is very good. So if you read that book, you will really get a full image of what the Targaryens are. They came from old Valyria, they were dragon riders, they believe heavily in dreams and premonitions and prophecies. And the fall of the Targaryens certainly wasn't anything that they ever thought was going to happen. And they ruled Westeros for hundreds of years. And so a Targaryen being in the position that Viserys was in the beginning of Game of Thrones would have felt very out of place of him. Viserys would have been used to a lavish life of royals and, having everyone bend the knee to him and all that, what we saw in both shows that a royal would be accustomed to. Instead, Viserys was forced to flee his homeland, was forced to essentially beg and scramble to provide, survival for him and Daenerys. If he had had better interactions with people as a child, maybe that would have made him a sympathetic person. Just to give you a little bit of context, Viserys Targaryen was the first child born from his mother after 17 years of trying. Rhaegar, of course, the older brother who was killed before the events of Game of Thrones, is spoken about quite a bit. But whereas Rhaegar was allowed to have interactions with people, form friendships, and all that, Viserys wasn't even allowed to be with his mother alone because the Mad King was so paranoid and because his mother had dealt with so many fertility issues for so many years. Viserys was essentially locked up in the case that Rhaegar was killed so that Viserys would be the next in line. If he hadn't had to take care of Daenerys after going through everything he went through, because again, not only did he and his mother have to flee because the Targaryens were falling, but look at what happened to Rhaegar and Rhaegar's family once the Lannisters, sacked the city of King's Landing. Now, in Game of Thrones, we've seen so many redemption arcs. Who is to say that Viserys couldn't have gotten one himself? Jaime Lannister was a character that was widely considered irredeemable by those who just watched the show until he met Brienne of Tarth, and the viewership on him really turned around. I tried to think how this would have fit in the show, meaning Viserys Targaryen's redemption arc. Would it require Viserys having stayed with Illyrio and not going with the Dothraki? Perhaps if Viserys had come to good terms with Daenerys and perhaps came face to face with the idea that he wouldn't have been a good ruler and that he needed to support his sister, would that have helped? In typical Targaryen fashion, many siblings marry each other. If you saw House of the Dragon, you see just how true that is. If you watch House of the Dragon, you don't get a lot of Jaehaerys in it, but if you read Fire and Blood, you know that Jaehaerys married his sister. Then you also have Alicent and Viserys the First's children marrying. Viserys the Third, his parents were siblings, and his father's parents were siblings as well. So Viserys Targaryen had always come to, well, both Viserys and Daenerys, sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. Both of them always thought that the two would marry each other until Viserys saw that that would not help him in the political sense. And that is why he, married his sister off to Khal Drogo. What he also didn't know, which is revealed in the Game of Thrones series, is that Viserys Targaryen was supposed to marry the daughter of the ruler of Dorne. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember everything. He was set that was put in place during everything when he was a child that he was to marry one of the children of the ruler of Dorne, and when he came to the rightful age, he would marry her, and Dorne would provide their support to the Targaryens to help take the Iron Throne back for the Targaryens and away from the Baratheons. If Viserys had known this plan was in place, what would that have looked like? If he had not been killed by Khal Drogo, what would that have looked like? I we love so many characters in fiction that are broken. I want to say that one of the biggest reasons why people immediately gravitated to a character like Loki in the first Thor movie was because while he was doing evil things, you could sympathize with his backstory and realize that if he had just been shown perhaps more love from his father, he may not have turned out to be the person that he was. Could this have been the same with Viserys Targaryen? If Viserys Targaryen had actually gotten interaction as a child, felt love as a child, could he have been brought up to be a different person? Or could he have been humbled in a way that Jaime Lannister was humbled? Jaime Lannister certainly had no ounce of humility in him, and certainly didn't even view his actions against Bran Stark as something bad because he was all doing it in the name of quote unquote love for his twin sister Cersei. It was only after essentially being stripped of the lavish life that he was used to, being held prisoner, degraded by the Starks, by Brienne, and then eventually having his hand cut off, that he starts he starts displaying humility. Now, we saw that Viserys certainly was experienced humiliation while with the Dothraki, with Daenerys have being wed to Khal Drogo. Realistically, whoever Viserys was, say, in Westeros, didn't mean a whole lot to the Dothraki, and his word, his command, didn't mean anything at all. And that certainly was hurting his ego. We saw that it got him in the direction where he was killed. But if perhaps he had been, because in another sense also, because the Targaryens came from Essos and because they had ruled Westeros for so long, originally he was being treated quite well in Essos. still being treated as if he was the rightful king and one day would return to the Iron Throne. Now, once he is in the presence of the Dothraki, they don't care about that. If that had continued and perhaps Viserys had gotten humble from that experience, if he had continued to be with Daenerys and Dothraki, I wonder if that would have changed him, or if perhaps Viserys had needed to go off on his own. I also think of the idea of Viserys having gone off on his own and becoming a rival to Daenerys for the Iron Throne, somehow bringing up his own army and eventually being an adversary for Daenerys later in the story. Now, obviously, that will never happen because the character is dead both in the show, which ended, and in the books, which is currently going. But I'd like to think about it sometimes. And I like to think what a redemption arc would look for Viserys. I don't have a clear black and white image of what I think that redemption arc would be, but I'd like to think that there is room in a what if scenario for it. I think it would be really cool. Perhaps this is my love for Harry Lloyd coming in, or just perhaps that I like seeing redemption arcs, or I like seeing more character development instead of perhaps just cannon fodder, which seems a lot what Viserys was. Now, Viserys's death was a little pivotal for Daenerys becoming who she is, but I think it'd be really interesting, maybe for Viserys himself to come to terms with the fact that his father was indeed the Mad King, and those were not just rumors simply circulating around to discredit his rule. I think it would be interesting to see Viserys support his sister as dragons come back into Westeros and all that. I think it would have been really cool. It's not something that will happen, but I am hoping um see, Fire and Blood is just a part one. And there is supposed to be a part two to Fire and Blood. When it will come out, we don't know. As we all know, George R.R. Martin does write a little on the slower side, and we are all still waiting for The Winds of Winter to come out, the next book in the Game of Thrones series. I know it's called a Song of Fire and Ice. I'm just used to calling it Game of Thrones because I'm introduced to this world by the shows first. But I am hoping in the second Fire and Blood, maybe we get a little bit more information on Viserys in his childhood, because I think that he is often forgotten about in a world where we concentrate on Daenerys and then, of course, Rhaegar, because everything realistically was set off by Rhaegar's action. So let me know if you think that Viserys Targaryen could have been redeemed and what you think that redemption arc would have looked like. Or if you think that he simply was used as cannon fodder and that is all his character was good for, I would appreciate it. Please make sure you like and subscribe. I did another character analysis where I talked about the video game character Dutch Vanderlyn from the Rockstar video game series Red Dead Redemption. So why don't you go check that out and let me know what you think. I'm kind of really enjoying these character analysis videos, and just got to figure out who the next person I'm going to talk about. But if you have any suggestions, let me know. And again, comment on what you think about this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.